Alright gamers, welcome to my ADC 14.1 tier list. We're not going to go too in-depth into builds in this particular video because I already did a video on the best build for every ADC a few days ago, so I'll put the link for that in the description in case that is what you're interested in. Starting off with S tier, we have Miss Fortune, Nilah, and Senna. Miss Fortune is a very obvious one since the lethality items seem to have been a big buff compared to the previous lethality items, and Miss Fortune was an ADC that was already building full lethality. So it's normal that you would benefit a lot from that. Run rate has gone up massively by about 2%. Build, you can just run the same build as usual, which was Youmuu's into Collector into Cyrilda's, or you can experiment with some of the new lethality items. You can do like Hubris Rush. Doesn't really matter too much so long as you're building any of the lethality items that are strong. Again, you can refer to my video for help with that. Nilah also benefited a little from the lethality changes because she did already rush Collector. So she still wants to rush Collector, obviously, but that has become, stronger for her compared to what it was before. And she's also probably benefited a lot from the map changes where the bot lane has become elongated. There is more room to run down the opposing ADC now. There might be other stuff as well. Can't really account for everything, but it does seem like she has substantially benefited from this patch overall. And she probably also benefits disproportionately as well from the lethality changes because she gets percentage armor pen innately from her Q. So any lethality that she does get, she actually gets more damage out of it than any other ADC, just purely because of the fact that she's already by default penetrating more armor, so that lethality is more valuable for her. Meanwhile, Senna, ADC, is also insanely busted right now, it seems, just building lethality items. You can do like Youmuu's into Voltaic, or Collector, or Hubris, doesn't really matter too much. Lethality just seems to be really busted on her. And on top of that, there is also a secondary thing going on, where ADCs at the moment can buy a support item, the support item, and they just share gold with their support. Their support gets a ton of gold, way more gold than they would otherwise get, while the ADC doesn't really lose out on any gold, and if anything, they probably actually get more gold so long as they share minions appropriately with their support. I tried that the other day on Twitch, actually just yesterday, and it takes an absurdly long time to even get the farming penalty for some reason. And in fact, with me, it only occurred after my support started roaming and leaving the lane. I've heard that when you run the strategy, you should tell your support not to do that. If my support hadn't left the lane, I don't know if I ever would have had the farming penalty. Maybe it would have arisen like really late into the game. But either way, you can only really gain gold with this strategy. And on top of that, Bloodsong also seems to be really overtuned, which is one of the support item upgrades. And it also has immense synergy with Senna. So yeah, it's just crazy effective right now to run Senna as ADC. But either start the support item or start Thorin's Blade and build support item on your first base. And then just share gold with your support. You'll get obviously not as much mist overall still as support Senna would, but you're just going to be taking or like ridiculously abusing the strategy of the support item because it is so crazy effective. Even without that though, it seems to be quite strong to run Senna as lethality the way as ADC just because the lethality items are so busted. But, there is a huge advantage to running Senna with a support item as well. That also is the case for Nilah as well, by the way, I forgot to mention. She is definitely stronger when you run the support item strategy, but she is, either way, S tier, ridiculously strong even without that support item strategy. That is completely optional for her, but you do also get a substantial power boost if you run that support item and upgrade it into Bloodsong, just because you don't really lose out on gold, you probably even gain gold, and your support just gains massively increased gold gain as well. Meanwhile, for A tier, we have Aphelios, Jhin, Twitch, Vayne, Samira, Caitlyn, Jinx, and Draven. The crit ADCs like Jinx, Caitlyn, they seem to be either in the same spot as in the previous patch, or maybe even slightly better. I think probably the removal of the mythic system just if everything else was equal, that would actually be a benefit to these ADCs, just purely because Infinity Edge didn't really gain anything from being a mythic. Like you had Youmuu's like completely losing out on its passive, or other mythics having their effects entirely stripped away, whereas these ADCs just didn't really have any changes. They just lost like 5% crit damage, which is barely anything. You know, it's just like I actually think the item rework in like 13.10, I think it was, which made Infinity Edge mythic. I think that was a downgrade for most ADCs, or at least most Infinity Edge ADCs. Because Infinity Edge didn't become any stronger from that, but any other item, when it became a mythic, it did become a lot stronger. So just the complete undoing of that system, it does slightly benefit these crit ADCs, but not by a huge margin. Definitely also they don't benefit from it nearly as much as lethality ADCs benefit from how strong lethality is right now. A fellow I've put at the top of A tier. I was even debating putting him in S tier, but I don't think he's quite worthy of that. But he is very, very strong at the moment, particularly in the hands of very experienced and masterful Aphelios players. Obviously benefited a lot from the lethality change, where now his E just penetrates full armor and doesn't have to scale up, so it becomes more worthwhile to put early points in E. And even if you're still just only maxing it by like level 12, that is still a hell of a lot stronger than he was in the previous patch. So even after the nerf, still way, way stronger than he used to be. And he's not even getting nerfed again in 14.2, so that's nice. He should remain in a good spot for quite a while, hopefully. At least until maybe in pro play he turns out to be too strong, but for now, it's promising. Jhin, his crit build, as mentioned, is, well, a little bit nerfed compared to something like Jinx, just purely because he lost out on Gale Force, which was a really good item for him. So just having to go from Gale Force to Infinity Edge is a slight nerf to him, but otherwise, it's not that bad. You know, crit items are still good. Infinity Edge, like I said, benefited overall from the mythic system being removed. But that being said, his best build right now is just going to be lethality, just purely because lethality is so overtuned. So yeah, you can either run like Hubris, or you can just run the Yomu's collector build. Doesn't really matter too much. It's either way, like he's going to be quite strong no matter what you build. Then Twitch, I've put in A tier. I think he was already he was already really good in the previous patch. Still really good in this patch, mostly just for the same reasons. The mythic system being removed didn't really change much for him. He still pretty much builds the same things he did anyway, and those items didn't really gain or lose power. The only thing that could be slightly affecting him is I think actually Hexplate is really strong on Twitch, whether you're doing it as first item, second item, third item. The optimal position for it is, to be debated. But either way, I think no matter where you're building it, it is a huge addition for him. It's actually crazy synergy from what I've tested. My favorite build that I've been running is Bork into Hexplate into Runance. And that just is such a huge power spike at the 2-item point and 3-item as well. And yeah, anything else from this tier, I think we've mostly explained it already. If you want to know optimal builds, again, you can just look at my previous build video. Then B tier, we have Ashe, Xayah, Sivir, Tristana, Lucian, Varus, Kalista, Kog'Maw, Zeri. You can see pretty much all the on-head ADCs are here besides Vayne. Vayne is just quite good no matter what she builds. She can either do, obviously, on-hit Triforce or even lethality, potentially. So she's like quite flexible, and she was strong with all those builds in the previous patch, so she is still going to be strong now. But these other DCs, so I don't think Terminus is really that good an item. I think it was being really hyped when the patch first arrived, but in reality, I don't think it's like anything exceptional. It seems to be an optimal item for these ADCs, but hardly an upgrade compared to what they had before. So, yeah, but I think they were mediocre before. They're still mediocre now. It wasn't really any improvement at all, so they're going to stay in B tier for me. Then Ashe, hurt a little bit by the Triforce losing its mythic status, I think. She was previously in A tier, I believe, but we moved her down to B tier. Xayah, Sivir, I think both might have been B tier. Maybe I had Sivir in A tier. But Navori, for whatever, I think it lost 5 AD. Yeah, Navori lost 5 AD, which is quite a big hit compared to Infinity Edge losing 5% crit chance. Because it affects them pretty much equally at all times, both early game and late game, whereas the Infinity Edge nerf was mainly a late game thing. So pretty much every Navori ADC has been hit indirectly, which is also why Tristana at the moment actually seems to maybe even be leaning more towards Infinity Edge, where she used to lean more towards Navori. Both are still fun on her, but it's a thing that Navori just seems to have become systemically weaker this patch compared to Infinity Edge. So that's also definitely affecting both of these. I've decided to put them both in B tier. Lucian also not doing great because of that Navori change. In fact, there seems to be other builds that are viable on him, but they don't necessarily shine as better than Navori, so that's kind of rough for him. Then Varus, again, we got potentially lethality, potentially on hit. Neither build really seems to shine greatly above the other. Maybe lethality could be better just because of how busted it is this patch, but generally I would say on hit Varus is better, so hard to say. But either way, neither build is in an amazing state, but decided to put him in B tier. Then Callista also, another one-hit ADC. She, again, just like Varus, she potentially can do lethality. It sounds really weird, but I've actually been stomped already by one lethality Callista. Hard to say exactly how much that was because of Callista, because her support was also Senna rushing lethality, and as a duo, they just kept one-shotting us anytime anybody got near them, but I'm not sure like how much that was Callista, as opposed to just Callista and Senna combined, always bursting us all at once. But regardless, her win rates don't seem to show her as being like that amazing as either on hit or lethality, so B tier for her. Zeri, if you take it at face value, her win rate has actually gone massively down this patch. Upon further inspection, though, it would seem that this is mostly just because of people building her wrong. The build from the previous patch, which was Stormrazor into Navori into Runans, seems to be just about as good. Maybe a little bit weaker, as mentioned, because of the Navori becoming a little bit weaker, but overall still seems quite decent for her. But Hexplate, which on the surface should sound like it should be really, really good on her, just actually seems to be terrible, at least as a first item or second item. The build that most people are doing right now, which has actually become her most popular build, is Hexplate into Runans into Titanic Hydra. This sounds like it should be great on her. The problem is that obviously Tank Zeri was nerfed a long time ago, and her reliance on crit massively increased. So that seems to be making this build, which sounds like it should be good, just in practice actually terrible. And crit builds, which sound like, they, they just haven't changed, so they're still effective on Zeri. Hexplate could actually still maybe be good on Zeri, so long as you're building it after a crit core, so you could do Stormrazor into Navori into Runans and then Hexplate. By that stage of the game, it might actually be good, because by that point you will actually be dealing damage, which, Zeri does need to be building crit to deal damage these days. But you definitely can't really build it any sooner than that. Maybe third item, maybe. But you definitely need to precede it with a crit core. And then for C tier, finally we have Ezreal and Kai'Sa. Ezreal definitely hit the hardest by the changes. I think previously I had him in A tier and he's dropped all the way to C tier. That's because of Triforce losing its mythic status and losing a lot of power. And then even the builds that don't rely on Triforce also still lost a lot of power just because of Serylda's losing a lot of power for Ezreal. It's lost a lot of armor penetration because he doesn't build lethality to maximize that stat on that item. And it's even lost some ability haste, I believe, and it's also lost the ability to slow permanently. Now it only slows opponents below 50% HP. So they made a lot of changes to this item. Some nerfs, some power neutral, some buffs. But in almost every way, everything was a nerf for Ezreal with that item, and it was a core item on Ezreal. And he doesn't really have any option but to build it, despite it massively losing power, because Lord Dominik's is certainly not an option. He needs to build Serylda's if he needs armor pen, but Serylda's is terrible now. So he is going to be buffed next patch. As far as I can tell, they're giving him some really huge buffs, which should hopefully make him actually quite good, even despite Serylda's being weak. That is how you would address that issue. You're not going to rework Serylda's just because Ezreal is weak. You just make Ezreal strong despite Serylda's being weak. So next patch, that should hopefully be resolved, but for now, C tier, because he's absolutely terrible. And then Kai'Sa, I think, was already in B tier for me. I didn't think she was amazing in the previous patch, and seems to have also not benefited from the mythic system being removed. I think generally, so Ginsu's became weaker. I actually would say that on-hit ADCs became weaker, because Ginsu's became significantly weaker. While, like I said, Terminus, which was expected to be a huge buff for these ADCs, actually completely mediocre, not really a visible upgrade over the previous options. So, on top of that, there might be other changes affecting Kai'Sa. I'm not entirely sure, but all of her builds seem to be suffering right now. Crit, on-hit, AP, none of them really seem to be amazing. Even lethality, she has built lethality in the past. You could try experimenting with lethality items on her, but none of them really seem to stand out as significantly better than her other builds. So it just seems like she's really bad right now, and probably will be until she actually gets buffs. But anyway, that's been my tier list, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Once again, make sure to check out the previous video where I mentioned all the optimal builds for all these ADCs. I'll see you guys in the next video.